I'm glad the filmmakers had the sense to let Carol cut down Red, instead of leaving the cops to bust in and save the day. Her vengeance is much more satisfying, given how Red used her like a punching bag. Seriously, there are times when it looks like Charles McGraw is going to snap Virginia Gray like a twig. The actress was always petite, but in this movie she seemed particularly thin and frail. And I can't help but wonder if it had something to do with her personal life. Gray had been romantically involved with Clark Gable following the death of his wife, Carol Lombard, in 1942. Gable dated a few women while recovering from that loss, but Hollywood insiders put their money on Virginia Gray to eventually get Gable to the altar for the fourth time. So it came as a surprise to everyone and a stone shock to Gray when just before she made this film, Gable unexpectedly got hitched to British actress and socialite Sylvia Ashley, a.k.a. Lady Stanley of Alderley, a misbegotten union that fell apart after a couple of miserable years. Now, Gray continued on with her career, often cast in melodramas by her good friend, producer Ross Hunter. But friends said she never stopped carrying a torch for Gable, even though their romance never rekindled. She kept acting well into the 1970s and lived to be 87 years old, and never did get married. A top-billed Michael O'Shea was a poor man's Jimmy Cagney, and although he was groomed for stardom, it never really came.
Now look, honey, I never get into any real trouble. No bullet's ever had my name on it. And besides, I gotta live with my conscience.
His most satisfying role was in Real Life, where he went home every night with the missus, Virginia Mayo. So while he was making The Threat on a bargain budget at RKO, she was crosstown at Warner Brothers, co-starring with the real Jimmy Cagney in White Heat. Now, O'Shea was primarily a song and dance man, but it was inevitable that he'd be cast as a cop, since all 5 of his brothers actually were police officers. And later in his life, O'Shea would keep the string unbroken, becoming an honorary deputy in the Ventura County Sheriff's Department. For Frank Conroy, who played D.A. Barker McDonald, The Threat was just one more job in a performing career that dated all the way back to 1913, when he made his first appearance on a British stage. Now, based on this film, you'd have no idea that Conroy was an Englishman, born in Derby in 1890. After a long career that included roles in such distinguished films as Grand Hotel, The Oxbow Incident, and The Snake Pit, Conroy won a Tony Award in 1957 for his featured role in the American version of Graham Greene's play, The Potting Shed. Don McGuire, the avuncular and ill-fated Joe Turner, already has been discussed at length on an earlier episode of Noir Alley, when we showed Armored Car Robbery, in which he was partnered with Charles McGraw on the right side of the law. As I noted then, McGuire would go on to be a busy writer and director in the 1950s, making pictures with Jerry Lewis and Frank Sinatra, both of whom became good friends. He would, late in life, earn an Oscar nomination for his part in the creation of the 1982 hit Tootsie. McGuire wrote the original stage play upon which the screenplay was based. Now, Felix Feist directed 2 other notable noirs previously screened on Noir Alley, The Man Who Cheated Himself and Tomorrow is Another Day, as well as another 1949 film, Guilty of Treason, in which he depicted even more torture, only this time in the service of an anti-Soviet film about Hungarian priest Josef Mindszenty, who courageously opposed both the Nazis occupying his nation and the communists who liberated it. Now, if you think The Threat was brutal, wait until you see Guilty of Treason. Feist had a flair for violent melodrama. When he made stuff like The Battles of Chief Pontiac or Pirates of Tripoli, the results weren't nearly as exciting. In addition to directing a lot of TV in the 50s and 60s, Feist concluded his career as executive producer, what we now call a showrunner, for the popular television soap opera Peyton Place. As I mentioned at the top, Charles McGraw would enjoy a long career, primarily as a character actor. In 1955, he starred in the TV series version of the movie Casablanca, taking Bogart's place as suave casino owner Rick Blaine. He worked equally in television and movies, playing his last role in 1977 as an Air Force general in Twilight's Last Gleaming, directed by Robert Aldrich. McGraw suffered a grisly demise on July 30th, 1980, when he slipped in the bathroom of his Studio City apartment and crashed through the glass shower door, cutting himself so badly he bled out on the floor. The incident spurred new laws requiring the installation of safety glass in all bathrooms in California. Okay, join me back here next week when Noir Alley presents one of the essential films in the rise of noir, Fritz Lang's 1944 drama, The Woman in the Window, starring Edward G. Robinson, Joan Bennett, and Dan Duryea. Until then, continue sharing your comments, criticisms, suggestions, recipes, and household hints over on our Facebook page and Twitter feed. And until then, remember, if it's hot or cold, it's still beer. You know what? Let's skip the chaser and get straight to it.